The last thing Fletcher Brooks expected on a freezing Thursday night was to find a woman in heels and a silk blouse locked outside the apartment building, banging on the glass door like her life depended on it. Hey, excuse me," she shouted, her breath puffing out in frantic little clouds. "Can you let me in? My phone's dead, and the door locked behind me." Fletcher paused, holding a bag of groceries in one arm and a squirming 5-year-old in the other. "Ellie, hold tight," he said to his daughter before shifting the bag to unlock the door. The woman practically stumbled inside, hugging herself against the cold. "Thanks," she panted, brushing her dark curls out of her face. "I was only out for a second. My assistant was supposed to meet me here." "I didn't think the door would never mind." Fletcher gave a small nod, adjusting Ellie on his hip. "No worries, happens to the best of us." Her eyes flicked to Ellie, who was busy sucking on her mitten. "She yours?" "Yeah, this is Ellie." He looked down at his daughter. "Say hi, Bug." Ellie gave a shy wave. "Hi," the woman smiled warmly. "Hi, Ellie, I'm Noelle." Fletcher's brows lifted, recognizing the name from the mailbox labels. "Noelle Keaton, you just moved into 4C, right?" She blinked. "Yeah, how'd you? I'm when I saw the name on the box." "Welcome to the building." She looked him over. His flannel shirt was wrinkled, his jeans stained with something that might have been applesauce. Still, there was something solid and kind in his rough edges. "Thanks, it's been a week," Fletcher chuckled. "I can imagine." "This place eats up first-timers. You good now?" She glanced toward the elevator. "Assuming the power doesn't go out, yeah, thanks again." "No problem." He shifted Ellie again. "Come on, kiddo, let's feed you before you start chewing on my arm." Noelle watched him go, her brows still furrowed. There was something about him gentle, unbothered, and clearly doing everything himself. She hadn't seen a ring. She also hadn't told him she was the CEO of Keaton Development Group, a real estate company that owned half the commercial blocks downtown, but it didn't seem like he'd care. The next morning, Noelle stepped into the lobby balancing her handbag, a laptop case, and a to-go coffee. She nearly dropped all of it when she spotted Fletcher kneeling by the vending machine, trying to coax a granola bar out of the jammed slot, while Ellie twirled beside him in a tutu. "Stuck again?" Noelle asked, walking over. Fletcher looked up, grinning. "This machine's got a personal vendetta against me." She bent down and gave the machine a firm thud with her palm. The granola bar fell instantly. Fletcher blinked. "Okay. So you're a vending machine whisperer." Noelle handed it to Ellie. "Nah, just a practiced New Yorker." Ellie took the bar, beaming. "Thank you, lady." "Noelle," she said, smiling. "You're welcome." Fletcher stood. "You heading to work?" "Yeah, meetings all day." "You?" He scratched his jaw, clearly debating how to answer. "I freelance, mostly construction, side gigs when I can get 'em." She nodded slowly, sensing he didn't love explaining that. "Well, if you ever need vending backup, you know where to find me," he laughed. "I'll keep that in mind." Over the next week, they kept running into each other, sometimes in the lobby, sometimes in the elevator. Once, Noelle offered him a ride when it was pouring, and he reluctantly accepted, though he looked wildly out of place in her sleek black Range Rover. "You sure this thing doesn't eject broke dads?" he joked as he buckled Ellie's car seat. Noelle tossed him a look. "Not unless you start talking politics." After that, they started grabbing coffee together only by accident, they told themselves, then dinner. Then she invited him and Ellie up to her place one evening and made pasta while Ellie colored on her tablet. "Your place is." Fletcher trailed off, looking around the luxury furnished apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that probably cost more than his old truck. "You settled in fast." Noelle shrugged, pouring wine. "I like spaces that feel finished." He didn't ask how she afforded it. She didn't offer, but when Fletcher excused himself to help Ellie use the bathroom, Noelle found herself watching him with a strange ache in her chest. He was patient, funny, and totally wrapped up in his daughter. She hadn't seen a man like that in a long, long time. A few nights later, she found him in the laundry room, sitting on the bench with his head in his hands while Ellie napped against his shoulder. "You okay?" she asked gently. He looked up, dark circles under his eyes. "Lost a job today. Site manager said they're cutting hours, said I'm too good for the grunt work, which is code for too expensive." He shook his head. "Rent's due in 2 weeks. I don't know how I'm going to swing it." Noelle sat beside him. "You're not alone, Fletcher." He looked at her, really looked at her, like he was just now noticing she wasn't just the pretty neighbor upstairs. You barely know me. I know enough. She reached over and gently touched his hand. Let me help. He pulled his hand away. I don't take charity. It's not charity. I'm offering you a job. My company needs someone to supervise an office renovation. You have the skills. It's legit. His brows furrowed. Your company? Noelle exhaled and met his eyes. I'm the CEO of Keaton Development Group. Fletcher stared at her, stunned. Yeah. And you're offering me a job. I'm offering you a chance. He didn't answer right away. Then he looked down at Ellie, sleeping peacefully in his lap. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. The next day, Fletcher walked into the Keaton Development main office in a clean shirt, his resume shakily typed and printed. Noelle greeted him in a navy power suit, her heels clicking against the tile floor. You clean up nice. You look terrifying, he said honestly. She burst out laughing. Good, let's get you hired. As he followed her down the hall, Fletcher realized something had shifted. He didn't just admire her anymore, he was falling for her. Hard. Fletcher adjusted the measuring tape along the conference room wall, pencil tucked behind his ear, while the junior architect nervously hovered beside him. The sleek downtown office buzzed with quiet efficiency glass-walled meeting rooms, tastefully minimalist decor, and a constant stream of sharply dressed professionals clicking past in tailored suits. It was a world away from the job sites he was used to. You don't have to breathe down my neck, Fletcher said without looking up. Sorry, the young man stammered. Just making sure the specs align with the renderings. They don't, Fletcher replied, straightening. You're off by half an inch on both sides. It'll throw off the entire panel installation. The architect flushed. I'll fix it. Fletcher gave a tight nod and made a note in his clipboard. He didn't enjoy embarrassing people, but time was money in this place, and he wasn't about to let a sloppy mistake cost Noelle's company more than it had to. He hadn't seen her all morning, though he knew she was upstairs. He could feel it in the energy of the building, the way people moved with a sharper edge, like gravity shifted slightly when she was near. When she finally appeared, it was without announcement. She stepped into the room mid-inspection, her blazer draped over one arm, eyes flicking quickly to the measurements on the wall before meeting his. You're ahead of schedule, she said. Your guy had the wrong numbers. I adjusted. She raised an eyebrow. He's not my guy. He's an intern. Then he's learning fast. A faint smile tugged at her lips, but she didn't let it linger. Can I borrow you for a few minutes? Fletcher handed the clipboard to the intern and followed her into the hallway. She led him into a quiet glass-walled office and closed the door behind them. Is something wrong? He asked. No, the opposite, actually. She leaned against the desk, arms crossed. The board approved the downtown expansion. I need someone to oversee the conversion of the old textile building on Vine Street. He studied her face. You want me to run it? I trust your judgment, and I know you won't cut corners. The weight of her words settled in. That's a big site. It's a big opportunity. Her voice softened. You've earned it, Fletcher. He took a breath, searching her expression. Why are you doing this? Because you're good, and because you don't ask for anything. He didn't respond right away. The silence stretched between them, charged and uncertain. I can't owe you something I don't understand, he finally said. You don't owe me, she replied. You've already paid in full. She stood straight then, her expression unreadable. Ellie's daycare is full-time now, right? Yeah, she likes it there. Good. You'll need uninterrupted hours on site. He nodded slowly, still watching her. You always compartmentalize like this, she blinked, caught off guard. Like what? Like feelings don't exist when numbers are in the room. Her breath hitched, almost imperceptibly. We're not here to talk about feelings. That's the problem. Before she could answer, her assistant knocked on the glass door, mouthing something urgent. Noelle straightened, smoothing her blouse. This conversation isn't finished, Fletcher said as he opened the door. No, she replied, her voice low. It's just beginning. That evening, Fletcher stepped into his apartment, still replaying their conversation. Ellie was on the floor coloring, a plate of cut-up strawberries beside her. His neighbor, Mrs. Linty, looked up from the couch. She was an angel, she said. Didn't even ask for cartoons. Thank you, he said, taking off his boots. I owe you. You can owe me by letting me bake you both something. You're too skinny. He laughed softly. "We'll take your banana bread any day." When she left, Fletcher sat beside Ellie and picked up a crayon. "Can I color with you?" he asked. She nodded, glancing at him. "Did you see the fancy building again?" He paused. "Yeah, I did. Did the pretty lady give you more work?" He looked down at the page and traced the edge of a cloud. "She did. Do you like her?" Ellie asked without looking up. He swallowed. "I think I do." Ellie nodded like that made perfect sense. "You should draw her," he chuckled. "I don't think I'd do her justice." The next day, Noelle stood at the edge of the Vine Street site, hard hat in hand, watching as Fletcher barked instructions to the crew. The building was still hollow and stripped, exposed beams and concrete echoing with the sounds of drills and metal. But he moved through it like he belonged, like he saw what it could become. "You're early," he said when she approached. "I wanted to see the foundation outline before we finalized the interior plans." He handed her a set of blueprints, edges fluttering in the breeze. "I made a few changes. Moved the stairwell for better light, less wasted space." She scanned the drawings, brow lifting in approval. "This works." "I thought so." They stood in silence for a beat, the sounds of work humming around them. "Want to grab lunch?" she asked suddenly. He blinked. "Here?" "No." "I know a place nearby." He hesitated, glancing at the site. "I'll have someone cover you for an hour," she added. He gave a small nod. "All right." The restaurant was tucked into a brick corner a few blocks away, quiet, with low lighting and pressed linens. It screamed reservation required, and Fletcher felt the collar of his shirt grow tighter as they entered. Noelle ordered confidently, barely glancing at the menu. He followed her lead, trying not to gawk at the wine prices. "I was here last week with the mayor's office," she said casually. He leaned back. "I forget sometimes how deep your world runs." She met his eyes. "It doesn't mean anything if I can't be real in it." "Are you?" he asked. She hesitated. "With you, yes." Their food arrived, but neither of them touched it for a long moment. "I used to think being alone was the safest way to be in control," she said softly. "And now, I'm realizing control isn't the same as peace." Fletcher looked at her, really looked, and saw the cracks beneath the polished veneer, not weakness, humanity. "I don't want to be your charity case," he said. "You aren't. I don't want to be your project. You're not that either." He leaned forward, voice low. "Then tell me what I am." She looked down, gathering her thoughts like they were fragile glass. When she lifted her gaze again, it held something unguarded. "You're the first person who sees me and doesn't flinch." He stared at her, heart pounding. "Then you'd better stop running," he said. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The gala was a mistake. At least, that's what Fletcher told himself as he adjusted the stiff collar of his borrowed tuxedo and stood outside the glittering entrance of the Winthrop estate. A historic mansion turned event hall lit like a chandelier against the night sky. He felt like a misplaced puzzle piece among the sleek black cars and velvet ropes. The invitation had arrived in a thick envelope with gold calligraphy, hand-delivered to the job site by one of Noelle's assistants. No note, just a line at the bottom. "Your name is on the list. Bring a guest." He hadn't asked questions. He just called Mrs. Linty to watch Ellie for the evening, dug out the only pair of polished dress shoes he owned, and borrowed a suit from his brother-in-law. The tie didn't quite match, but he doubted anyone inside would notice him long enough to care. A valet opened the door, and Fletcher stepped into a sea of glittering gowns, sharp suits, and champagne flutes. The air smelled like roses and money. A string quartet played near the grand staircase, their sound impossibly delicate above the murmur of laughter and clinking glasses. He spotted her instantly. Noelle stood near the far end of the ballroom, surrounded by a group of men in tailored blazers and women with diamonds that caught the light like fire. She wore a deep navy dress that swept the floor, her hair in a loose twist, eyes sharp and amused as she nodded through someone's story. She hadn't seen him yet. He hesitated, one hand in his pocket, the other running along the edge of his cuff. Then she turned and her expression shifted. "Fletcher," she said when he reached her, voice low and unmistakably pleased. "You came. You sent a tuxedo code. I figured it wasn't optional. I wanted you here." He glanced around. "I don't exactly blend. That's the point." One of the board members leaned in. "Noelle, aren't you going to introduce us to your guest?" She smiled, all business. "This is Fletcher Brooks. He's overseeing the Vine Street renovation. We'd fall behind without him." Eyes flicked over him, assessing. One of the men extended a hand. Your specs were in the last proposal package. Impressive work. Fletcher shook his hand. Appreciate that. They drifted into polite chatter and Noelle touched his arm lightly. There's a balcony through that archway, she murmured. If you want air, he nodded, grateful. The ballroom was too bright, too polished, too filled with conversations that didn't need him. The balcony was empty, save for a single waiter lighting candles in glass lanterns along the edge. The city stretched out beyond the marble railing, glittering with indifferent beauty. Noelle joined him a moment later, 2 glasses in hand. Champagne, she said, offering one. He took it but didn't drink. Does this kind of thing ever stop feeling like theater? She leaned against the railing. If it does, I'll probably be doing it wrong. He glanced sideways. You fit here. I've learned to. He hesitated, then said, I've been offered jobs before, not like this, but still, you're the first person who ever made me feel like I didn't have to prove I deserved it. She turned to face him fully. You didn't. I saw the way you work, the way you think. It was never about pity, Fletcher. I know that now. Their silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but full of something else, something unspoken. I wasn't expecting to see you here, she said softly. I thought maybe you'd stay home. Or tell me this world wasn't yours. He looked at her, really looked. It's not, but you are. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. Then she stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to want you just because you're different from everything I know. And I don't want to want you just because you opened a door for me I didn't think existed. Then what do? He set the glass down on the railing. We stop pretending this is just business. She didn't move away. Her hand grazed his, fingers brushing in a quiet question. He answered by curling his around hers, anchoring the moment. I haven't been with anyone in a long time, she admitted. There's always a motive. Always a price. I'm not interested in either. I'm used to being the one in control. I don't want control, I want truth. She studied his face, eyes searching. I'm scared of what happens if this gets real. I'm scared of what happens if it doesn't. The music from inside floated through the open balcony doors, soft and distant. Noelle leaned forward, her forehead resting briefly against his chest. For a moment, everything else fell away. When she pulled back, her eyes were clear. Come with me. Where? Somewhere quieter. She led him down a back hallway, away from the ballroom, past catering staff and coat closets. They slipped into a side room small, dimly lit, with tall windows and velvet curtains. A forgotten lounge, unused tonight, she closed the door behind them. I've built a life that looks perfect from the outside, she said, turning toward him. But most days I feel like I'm just keeping it from collapsing. He stepped closer. Then let it collapse. I'll be there when it does. She reached for him then, and he met her halfway. Their kiss was quiet, sure, and devastating in its simplicity. Not rushed, not desperate, just real. Afterward, she stayed close, forehead against his jaw. I don't do halfway, she whispered. I wouldn't want you to. She looked up, her voice steady. Then I'm all in, he nodded, heart steady for the first time in years. Me too. Outside, the city kept blinking, uncaring. But inside that quiet room, something shifted, something permanent, something impossible to undo. They didn't need chandeliers or champagne to make it matter. They had each other. And that, finally, was enough. The sound of small footsteps echoed through the hallway as Fletcher watched Ellie sprint ahead of him, her backpack bouncing with every step. She stopped at the reception desk of Keaton Development and proudly handed the receptionist a folded drawing. It's for Miss Noelle, she announced. It's a thank you card. The receptionist smiled warmly. I'll make sure she gets it. Fletcher caught up a moment later, ruffling Ellie's hair. We're just here to pick up the site plans for the West Wing, he said, less to the receptionist and more to himself as he scanned the open floor. He hadn't been back to the main offices in nearly 2 weeks. After the gala, things had shifted. He and Noelle hadn't labeled anything, hadn't needed to. They simply knew. Their lives had begun to blend not carelessly, but steadily. Ellie had grown attached so quickly it almost scared him. Should I tell Miss Keaton you're here? The receptionist asked. No, Fletcher said, adjusting the strap of his tool bag. Don't interrupt her schedule. I'll just grab the plans and go. But Noelle had already spotted them through the glass wall of her office. She stepped out, heels silent on the carpet, and crouched to Ellie's level. Is that for me? She asked, taking the drawing with both hands. Ellie nodded. It's you and Daddy and me. That's your building. Noelle looked at the scribbled skyscraper, their stick-figure family standing in front of it, and smiled. I love it. I used a glitter pen, Ellie added. Daddy said he didn't like glitter, but I think he was joking. Noelle met Fletcher's eyes, laughter dancing behind hers. I'll frame it. He shifted his weight. We were just swinging by, didn't mean to interrupt. You didn't, she said, standing. Actually, I was hoping to talk to you. Just for a minute. Ellie, would you mind showing my assistant how your tablet works? She's terrible with buttons. Ellie beamed. I'm really good with buttons. Fletcher followed Noelle back into her office, closing the door behind him. The moment felt different, not heavy, just full. I got a call this morning, she said, walking behind her desk. City Council approved the zoning exception. We're officially clear to begin Phase 2. That's faster than expected. I pulled a few strings. He crossed his arms. You always do. She set the drawing down gently. They also want to meet the project lead, the man behind the redesign. They asked if you'd attend the upcoming advisory panel. He blinked. You want me to speak in front of them? You're the one who rebuilt the entire floor plan with better traffic flow and more natural light. You're the one who caught the load bearing miscalculation before the engineers did. You belong in that room. He looked down, jaw tight. I've never been in a room like that. She came around the desk and placed a hand on his arm. You've already changed the way we work. You just haven't noticed. He let out a slow breath. I'll do it. But only if you're there. I wouldn't be anywhere else. Later that night, as Fletcher stood in the kitchen stirring pasta, Ellie sat at the counter arranging tiny plastic animals into what she called a zoo parade. The apartment smelled like basil and garlic, warm and alive. Noelle leaned against the doorway, barefoot, her blazer draped over a chair nearby. I got a call from my father, she said casually. Fletcher looked up. That's rare. He wanted to know if I was serious about you. He set the spoon down. What did you tell him? That I'm not in the habit of explaining things to people who never took the time to know me. He wiped his hands with a towel. Do you want him to approve? I don't care if he does. She crossed the room, lowering her voice. But I care if you think this is just rebellion on my part. It's not. He stepped closer, brushing her hair behind her ear. I don't think that. I've never thought that, she exhaled. Good. They ate dinner together, the three of them, and later, when Ellie had gone to bed and the apartment was quiet, Noelle curled into the couch with Fletcher beside her. I've been thinking, he said, arm draped around her. That's dangerous. I'm serious. He shifted, facing her. I've been offered projects before, but I always turned them down because they felt like temporary fixes. This feels like a foundation. She leaned into him, her voice soft. So what are you saying? I don't want to be temporary in your life. Or Ellie's. You're not. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her entire body went still. I didn't plan to do this tonight, he said. In fact, I didn't plan to do this at all. But I was walking past a store after work, and I saw this ring, and I thought, why wait? She stared at the box, then up at him, eyes wide and unguarded. I love you, Noelle. I love the way you fight for what you believe in, the way you protect people, even when you're scared. I love how you look at Ellie like she's already yours. I love that you see me and you don't flinch. He opened the box. A simple, elegant band with a small emerald set in gold. I don't need a big wedding. I don't need anything fancy. I just need you. For one breathless second, she didn't say anything. Then her voice broke. You're insane. I've been called worse. She laughed, tears catching in her throat. Yes, his brows lifted. Yes, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring on her finger and she wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him into a kiss that felt like the end of one life and the beginning of another. Weeks later, they stood under a canopy of soft white lights on a rooftop overlooking the city. Ellie held a small bouquet and tried very hard not to trip on her flower girl dress. Mrs. Linty cried openly. The ceremony was short, honest, and full of laughter. Afterward, as they danced with the skyline behind them, Noelle rested her head against Fletcher's shoulder. You sure you're okay with all this? She murmured. Are you kidding? He said. I checked on a woman locked outside once. She turned out to be the best decision I ever made. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. And you turned out to be the life I didn't know I was allowed to want. They kissed, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't need an audience. And far below them, the city kept moving, unchanged, unknowing. But somewhere on that rooftop, a CEO and a struggling dad danced into a future neither of them had planned but both of them had chosen. Together. The scent of fresh paint and sawdust still clung to the walls of the completed Vine Street building as Noelle stepped inside, her heels echoing softly across the polished concrete floor. It was just past sunrise, and the morning light filtered in through the tall industrial windows, casting golden pools across the open workspace. The transformation was complete. What had once been a crumbling textile factory was now a modern, sunlit office with clean lines and purpose in every square foot. She stopped near the reception desk, which had been hand-built by a local craftsman Fletcher had insisted on hiring. Her fingers brushed the smooth surface as she turned slowly, taking in the results of the last 6 months of work of rebuilding not just a space, but something deeper. Fletcher appeared at the far end of the corridor, dressed in dark jeans and a button-down shirt she hadn't seen before. He looked freshly showered, more relaxed than she'd seen him through the final stretch of construction. He had paint on his knuckles still, and she found herself smiling at the small, familiar detail. "I thought I'd beat you here," she said as he reached her. "I've been here since 5, he replied. "Wanted to check the HVAC controls. They were running warm yesterday." "You still don't trust automated systems, do you?" "I trust what I can fix with my hands," she nodded. "The board's coming at 10. They'll want to tour every floor. They'll be impressed," he said. "But not as much as I am," she tilted her head. "With what? How you saw this place before anyone else did, how you saw me." Noelle looked up at him, something quiet and unspoken blooming in her chest. "You made it real, Fletcher." "I just had the blueprint. I've been thinking," he said, stepping closer. "Now that the project's done and the contracts are closed and the dust has finally settled." She arched a brow. "You're not quitting, are you? Not unless you want to fire me. No chance." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. Her name was written across the front in his handwriting. "What is this?" she asked, taking it. "Open it." Inside was a deed. She read it once, then again, her brow furrowing. "You bought a house," he nodded. "Old brownstone in Carroll Gardens. Needs work, but the bones are good. It's got a backyard, a real fireplace, and enough bedrooms for us and Ellie. Maybe more someday." Her eyes lifted to his. "You're serious? I want us to have something that's ours. Not borrowed, not temporary, something real." She folded the paper carefully, her throat tightening. "You already gave me that. Then this is just the walls to put it in." They left the building hand in hand, the city still waking up around them. The board came and went, full of accolades and promises for future projects. But that evening, they picked up Ellie from school, stopped for cupcakes at the corner bakery she loved, and drove to the brownstone. It was a quiet street with trees lining the sidewalk and porch lights just beginning to flicker on. Fletcher unlocked the front door and Ellie darted inside, her sneakers squeaking against the hardwood. "Can I pick my room?" she called. "Only if you plan to sleep in it," Noelle replied. "I will." They found her upstairs moments later, curled on the floor of the second bedroom, already calling it hers. Noelle leaned in the doorway beside Fletcher and watched her for a moment. "I've never had this," she said softly. "A place that felt like a beginning." He reached for her hand. "Then let's begin." They spent the weekend painting walls, assembling furniture, and ordering takeout from the nearest Thai place. Ellie insisted on helping, even if most of her help involved stickers on the furniture and glitter in the grout. Noelle didn't care, neither did Fletcher. One night, as they sat on the front steps watching Ellie draw chalk hearts on the sidewalk, Noelle leaned her head on Fletcher's shoulder. "You know, I used to think I wanted the world." He rubbed his thumb gently over her knuckles. "And now I want this street, that house." "Our daughters laugh, your arms around me at the end of the day." "That's the world, Noelle, just a better version of it." She laughed, soft and warm. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Say exactly what I need, even when I don't ask." He kissed her temple, then her cheek, then her lips. "That's because I know you." And she believed him. Months passed. The company flourished. Fletcher took on more projects, training new supervisors and consulting on city planning committees. Noelle stepped back from constant board meetings, trusting her leadership team more. choosing instead to focus on what truly mattered. They married again, this time not in front of a city skyline or under a canopy of lights, but in their backyard. Ellie wore a crown of daisies and handed them the rings. Fletcher built the arbor himself. Noelle wore a simple linen dress with her feet bare in the grass. The vows were quiet. The kiss was full of promise. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the lanterns had dimmed, they lay in bed beneath the open window, the scent of honeysuckle drifting in on the breeze. "You're not going to change your mind and run back to the corporate tower, are you?" Fletcher asked. "Never." "I've already found everything I was chasing." He pulled her closer. "So did I." She fell asleep to the sound of his heartbeat, steady and sure, her hand resting where it always did over his heart, right where she belonged. And in the morning, the world began again, this time exactly where it was meant to together.